On Saturday, several people with Musk's Department of Government Efficiency showed up here at the USAID's headquarters demanding access to the building.
In the wake of explosive revelations, new evidence has emerged linking USAID to a series of controversial actions that shocked the nation.
USAID, run by radical lunatics, and we're getting them out.
Following President Trump's radical policy shifts and unprecedented arrest orders, allegations of financial corruption, political manipulation, and hazardous funding for questionable research surfaced. Critics and whistleblowers now demand accountability, as American taxpayers question billions misdirected abroad, while essential domestic needs are ignored. Debates intensify over whether reform or dissolution of USAID can restore faith in government spending completely. Shocking arrests and radical policy shifts. On that pivotal Saturday, a group of determined individuals, some allegedly affiliated with figures like Elon Musk and proponents of government efficiency, assembled outside the USA's headquarters. They demanded immediate access to the building in a climate of uncertainty following President Trump's inauguration. This public gathering set the stage for a series of dramatic actions. In a move that stunned both the nation and the international community, President Trump ordered the immediate arrest of all USAID members and suspended the agency for 90 days. This unprecedented action was presented as a necessary response to mounting evidence implicating the agency in widespread corruption and mismanagement. The context of these arrests is crucial to understanding the broader political landscape. With Trump's administration taking aim at what it perceived as wasteful spending overseas, the drastic order to detain USAID personnel signified a break from decades of conventional foreign policy. This wasn't simply about enforcing a law. It was a symbolic purge aimed at addressing ingrained inefficiencies and alleged malfeasance. Accounts from that day describe a scene of chaos and disbelief. Protesters and bystanders witnessed federal agents execute arrest orders as part of a sweeping campaign designed to overhaul the way American foreign aid was managed. Critics argued that the decision to arrest USAID members was politically motivated, intended both to target entrenched bureaucratic practices and to realign government priorities towards an America First agenda. Supporters of Trump's measure maintained that billions of dollars, allocated under the guise of humanitarian assistance, had instead been diverted into the pockets of corrupt officials and powerful elites. Such allegations fueled an already volatile debate. Lawmakers, activists, and everyday citizens began questioning, was this truly a bid to reform an outmoded system, or was it an opportunistic move to reshape foreign policy for domestic political gain? Furthermore, this bold action came amidst a series of other dramatic policy shifts, including strict new immigration laws and executive orders targeting the Gulf of Mexico. Each measure contributed to reconfiguring the government's narrative on spending, national security, and global strategy. The arrest warrants and subsequent suspension of USAID were thus not isolated events. They were interwoven with a broader governmental effort to recalibrate U.S. involvement overseas and to hold government agencies to a new standard of fiscal responsibility. As investigations unfolded in the days that followed, questions about transparency and accountability deepened, reinforcing the view that dramatic reform was imminent, even if the path forward remained uncertain. Financial mismanagement and disappearing billions. At the core of the controversy swirling around USAID lies an extraordinary tale of financial mismanagement and misappropriation. Investigations revealed that billions of dollars earmarked for international aid, designed to build schools, hospitals, clean water systems, and support disaster relief, had mysteriously vanished. Government inspectors discovered that funds meant to assist vulnerable populations in impoverished nations were often rerouted into private accounts and used to enrich influential insiders, leaving behind a trail of broken promises and unfinished projects. Detailed audits and whistleblower testimonies painted a damning picture. Money originally allocated for biodiversity conservation in African countries, along with disaster relief funds, reportedly disappeared without a trace. In one case, the agencies responsible for disaster recovery and infrastructure development were found to be billing exorbitant fees, a practice that inflated overall costs while significantly diminishing the actual resources available for those in dire need. Investigators noted that the absence of modern tracking mechanisms was a critical factor. Traditional methods of fund management had allowed corruption to flourish unchecked over decades, with millions of dollars being siphoned from public coffers for private gain. Experts stressed that the failure to modernize financial oversight was a systemic flaw that undermined USAID's ability to deliver on its humanitarian mission. In an era when digital technologies like blockchain and biometric verification could offer robust safeguards, USAID's reliance on outdated systems resulted in a convoluted web of transactions where accountability was nearly impossible to trace. The implications of these financial improprieties were not limited to the loss of funds alone. They also meant that entire communities around the world were left without the promised benefits, further entrenching poverty and instability. Cases emerged where funds intended for rebuilding war-torn regions had been diverted to finance military capabilities or other politically motivated agendas. Reports suggested that political meddling was intertwined with blatant corruption. Campaigns to support favorable regimes or bolster allies often overshadowed the primary mission of aiding those in need. This introduced a layer of political complexity that not only marred the efficacy of USAID's projects, but also called into question the integrity of aid distribution on a global scale. Political manipulation and media influence. Beyond the glaring issues of financial mismanagement, a darker narrative of political manipulation and media bias has emerged, casting long shadows over USAID's ostensibly humanitarian mission. Investigations have uncovered substantial evidence that funds, originally intended for disaster relief and infrastructure development, were covertly redirected to influence political outcomes in recipient nations. Rather than serving to build robust civil societies, these funds frequently became the instruments of power politics, supporting regimes and political groups whose allegiances aligned with U.S. geopolitical interests. In various regions, from Eastern Europe to Africa, a pattern became evident. Aid money was allocated not solely to improve poor living conditions, but also to bolster political factions that would, in turn, serve larger strategic purposes. In some instances, funds intended for post-war reconstruction were redirected to military expenses, or even used to train political operatives. For example, in Ukraine and Georgia, USAID's involvement coincided with significant political shifts that later contributed to regional conflicts. Such actions not only undermined the development objectives of aid programs, but also stoked existing tensions and fostered instability, complicating the geopolitical landscape. Parallel to these developments was the equally insidious influence of the media. Major news outlets, critics claim, received financial support or incentives from USAID-linked entities, effectively blurring the lines between independent journalism and state-sponsored messaging. Reports lauding USAID's successes often obscured the agency's underlying failures and the misappropriation of funds. Journalists and media analysts found themselves entangled in a system where critical reporting risked losing funding, thus engendering a self-perpetuating cycle of favorable coverage. The result was a distorted public perception in which USAID's contributions appeared overwhelmingly positive, concealing the substantial shortcomings that plagued its operations. This symbiotic relationship between USAID and media networks contributed significantly to shaping the narrative both domestically and internationally. When influential outlets reproduced what appeared to be objective assessments of USAID's work, the true extent of corruption and operational ineptitude was conveniently downplayed. Such practices raised serious questions about the independence of press coverage, as well as the ethics of government-funded media that effectively became cheerleaders for the very programs under scrutiny. As dissenting voices emerged, the media's role in either amplifying or stifling these criticisms came under intense examination. Political elites, too, were not immune from scrutiny. Many critics argued that USAID was used as a tool to serve hidden political agendas. Rather than fostering genuine democratic development, its funding mechanisms often bolstered leaders who would later act in their own self-interest, sometimes even opposing U.S. policies once in power. This strategic misalignment not only compromised the integrity of international aid, but also had profound repercussions on the political landscape of fragile democracies. With aid dollars subtly shaping elections and swaying policy decisions, the very notion of impartial humanitarian assistance was called into question, a debate that continues to stir controversy among policymakers and citizens alike. Calls for reform and a technological overhaul. In light of the mounting evidence of corruption, mismanagement, and political interference, calls for sweeping reform of USAID have reached a fever pitch. Advocates on all sides agree that the agency's outdated systems have played a pivotal role in allowing billions of dollars to be diverted and misused. In today's digital age, where innovations such as blockchain and biometric verification can bring unparalleled transparency and accountability, the failure to modernize stands out as a glaring oversight. Proponents of change argue that integrating blockchain technology would create a decentralized, tamper-proof ledger capable of tracking every dollar allocated by USAID in real time. Such a system could expose irregularities instantly, ensuring that no funds disappear into obscure private channels. Similarly, adopting biometric identifiers for aid recipients could safeguard against fraud by ensuring that resources reach the intended beneficiaries, rather than being siphoned off by intermediaries. These technological solutions, they contend, are not mere luxuries, but essential tools in reforming a system riddled with inefficiencies. At the policy level, there are mounting calls to restructure USAID's operations entirely. Some experts propose merging the agency with the State Department to improve oversight and create a more unified approach to foreign policy and aid distribution. Others argue for a radical decentralization, channeling funds directly to local non-governmental organizations, NGOs, that have a nuanced understanding of their community's needs. By bypassing bloated international contractors, the hope is that aid can be delivered more swiftly, effectively, and with greater accountability. Critics of the current system are not merely concerned with the financial implications of mismanaged funds. They highlight that the same outdated methods which allow corruption also contribute to broader strategic failures. When billions intended for humanitarian aid are funneled into opaque channels, the long-term development of recipient nations is compromised. Infrastructure projects remain incomplete, schools and hospitals lie unfinished, and local communities suffer the consequences of misdirected resources. Moreover, this inefficient allocation further fuels public distrust in the government, both domestically and abroad. In response to these challenges, high-ranking officials and policy experts are pushing for a comprehensive audit of USAID's practices. These proposals include not only technological updates, but also organizational changes aimed at instilling a culture of transparency. The objective is clear: to realign the agency with its core mission of providing effective, life-changing assistance to those in need, while ensuring that every taxpayer dollar is accounted for. Whether through modern digital tools or structural reforms, the push for accountability represents an urgent corrective measure, one that, if successfully implemented, might restore public confidence in the nation's commitment to global humanitarian efforts. Elon Musk's explosive claims and dangerous research allegations. Adding another explosive dimension to the unfolding saga, billionaire entrepreneur Elon Musk has emerged as a vociferous critic of USAID's operations. Musk's statements, delivered both via social media and high-profile interviews, have sparked a firestorm of debate regarding the true nature of many agency-funded projects. He claims that funds intended for humanitarian missions have instead been redirected into dangerous scientific research, efforts that may have inadvertently created hazardous biological threats rather than combating disease. According to Musk, certain foreign laboratories operating under USAID funding engaged in risky experiments that went well beyond conventional medical research. Instead of using funds to improve health systems or build medical infrastructure, significant amounts were allegedly poured into projects aimed at modifying pathogens, efforts which, critics argue, have the potential to produce more virulent strains of viruses. Such experiments, conducted with little oversight and using outdated safety protocols, have raised urgent questions about biosecurity and the ethics of government-funded research. Musk's allegations are particularly alarming in the context of existing evidence of mismanagement. If funds meant to support essential infrastructure and public health are instead used to experiment with dangerous biological agents, the potential consequences could be catastrophic. The implications extend far beyond financial misappropriation. They strike at the heart of national and global security. Some experts have even suggested that the misdirected funds and the resulting experimental projects may have opened up vulnerabilities that could be exploited in future biological crises. Amid this controversy, whispers of hidden facilities and secret tunnels have circulated, rumors that lend an almost cinematic quality to the unfolding scandal. The repeated mention of a clandestine tunnel beneath the USAID building, now highlighted by investigative tips and further amplified by Musk's pointed commentary, has only deepened public anxiety. Such stories fuel speculation that not only has corruption infiltrated the agency, but that covert operations may be hiding in plain sight. As calls for accountability mount, critics of USAID have seized on Musk's claims to underscore the urgent need for an independent investigation into all agency-funded research. Transparency, they argue, is non-negotiable when taxpayer money is at stake, and when the safety of millions could be jeopardized by reckless scientific experimentation. While Musk's assertions have their detractors, some insisting that such claims lack solid evidence, the public debate remains heated. In an era where even well-intentioned research can have unintended disastrous consequences, the case for rigorous oversight has never been more compelling. Domestic impact, global repercussions, and the uncertain future. As the controversies surrounding USAID unfold, the debate over foreign aid has transcended traditional policy discussions and struck at the very core of American domestic priorities. Many citizens are beginning to question why, in a time when roads, schools, hospitals, and public transportation in the United States are crumbling, billions of dollars continue to be sent overseas. The disconnect between what is promised in international aid and the desperate needs of American taxpayers has fueled a growing backlash against what is widely seen as irresponsible fiscal policy. Critics argue that the mismanagement and political manipulation associated with USAID are symptomatic of a larger systemic flaw, a prioritization of global influence over the welfare of American citizens. Studies and public opinion polls reveal that a significant portion of citizens believe that U.S. foreign aid should be scaled back, redirecting resources to address domestic challenges such as rising healthcare costs, graphically increasing college debt, deteriorating infrastructure, and unfulfilled public services. For struggling families, it is difficult to reconcile the lavish sums funneled abroad with the daily hardships faced in their own communities. Policy think tanks are questioning whether USAID, in its current form, is an asset or a liability. Proposals have emerged to hold the agency to stricter oversight, with some urging a complete merger of USAID into the State Department. Such moves are intended to eliminate inefficiencies, reduce the chances of funds being misappropriated, and align foreign aid more closely with clear national interests. Yet critics of this approach worry that too much centralization may stifle the agility needed for effective humanitarian responses. Globally, the ramifications of USAID's actions have been equally profound. When funds are diverted from genuine development projects to politically motivated agendas, the resulting instability in recipient countries has long-term effects on global security and economic growth. In parts of Africa, Eastern Europe, and the Middle East, the diversion of aid has at times exacerbated poverty and fomented political unrest rather than alleviating it. These unintended consequences have rippled back to affect U.S. credibility on the world stage, challenging the notion that American foreign aid is an unalloyed force for good.